Welcome, dear friend, to this sacred space. Today, we embark on a journey not just of faith, but of waiting, of wondering, and of learning to truly trust in the quiet. Sometimes, the most profound movements of God happen when we can't see them, when the world around us feels barren and still. You might not believe how God moved in the story we're about to explore, and even more powerfully, how He might already be moving in the deepest corners of your own life, perhaps in ways you haven't recognized yet. Have you ever felt like you were walking through a wilderness, a place where every path seems to lead to a dead end, where the landscape is dry and unforgiving, and the air itself feels heavy with impossibility? Perhaps you've been praying for a breakthrough, searching for a sign, a whisper of hope, and all you've encountered is silence. It's in these moments, when our strength is failing and our hope feels like a flickering candle in a gale, that God's promises often begin to unfold in their most profound and unexpected ways. Think about a farmer tending a field. He sows his seeds, waters them diligently, and then he waits. He can't force the sun to shine brighter or the rain to fall exactly when he wishes. There's a season of unseen work happening beneath the surface, a silent miracle of growth that precedes any visible fruit. His faith isn't in what he can see now, but in the deep, abiding promise of what will be. It's a faith that trusts the unseen processes, the hidden workings of nature, and dare I say, of the divine. This waiting can be the hardest part, can't it? It tests our resolve, it whispers doubts into our hearts, and it can make us feel utterly alone. We look around, and it seems like everyone else is moving forward, their lives blooming while ours remain dormant. The silence can feel deafening, amplifying our fears and our anxieties. But what if the silence isn't empty? What if it's a sacred space, a fertile ground where God is preparing something extraordinary, something completely new? It's easy to fix our gaze only on the visible. We want to see the breakthrough, the miracle, the answer unfolding before our eyes. But God's work often begins in the hidden places, in the unseen processes that lay the foundation for what's to come. Imagine a sculptor chipping away at a magnificent block of marble. At first, all you see are dust and scattered fragments. It's not a beautiful statue yet, not by a long shot. But with each careful strike, with each precise movement, the form begins to emerge. The true artistry isn't just in the finished piece, but in the unseen labor, the intention, the shaping that happens moment by moment. This journey through the wilderness, this season of waiting, can feel like the end of the road. But Scripture, that timeless wellspring of truth, speaks of a God who is not bound by our present circumstances. He doesn't just rearrange the existing landscape, He creates anew. He speaks life into desolation and brings beauty out of ashes. It challenges us to shift our perspective, to look beyond the immediate barrenness, and to trust that something transformative is already in motion. The stillness we might perceive is not a sign of abandonment, but often a sign of preparation. It's the quiet before dawn, the hush before the symphony begins. It's in that stillness that we might finally be able to hear the faintest whisper of His voice, guiding us, assuring us that even in the deepest desert, He is making a way. We're going to explore a passage that speaks directly to this hidden work of God, a promise that can reignite hope when all seems lost. And it all begins with understanding that God's power isn't always loud or dramatic, but often subtle and profoundly purposeful. Because sometimes we need to shift our focus from the mountain we can't climb to the unseen path God is already building beneath our feet. And in that shift, a deeper truth about God's faithfulness begins to reveal itself. And real quick, if you love Jesus and want to grow your faith, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos like this. Now let's keep going. There are seasons in our lives that feel like walking through a parched desert. The ground is cracked, there's no sign of rain for miles, and our thirst is deep. We look around for any sign of life, any oasis to quench our weary souls, but all we see is endless, unforgiving sand. This is the landscape many of us find ourselves in at some point, isn't it? A place where progress seems impossible, where our prayers feel like they're being swallowed by the vastness and our hope dwindles with each passing, barren day. Imagine a tiny seed planted in what appears to be lifeless earth. The sun beats down relentlessly and the ground offers no moisture. To an observer, nothing is happening. It's a scene of stagnation, a place where life simply cannot take root. Yet beneath the surface, unseen by any eye, a miraculous process is unfolding. The seed is drawing on hidden reserves, on a deep, internal promise of life that has been placed within it. It's not a matter of if it will grow, but when it will break through. This is the essence of the message we find in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19. It's a verse that speaks directly into those parched places of our lives, those moments where we feel utterly stuck. The prophet declares, "Indeed, I am doing a new thing, and now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." This is not just poetry. It is a divine declaration of active intervention. God is not standing by, He is actively doing. He is creating something that wasn't there before. The phrase, "making a way in the wilderness," is so potent. It speaks of divine ingenuity, of a power that can forge a path where no path exists. Think of the sheer impossibility of it, carving out a riverbed through solid rock and sand, bringing life-sustaining water to a place defined by its absence. This isn't about finding an existing path. It's about God creating one for us, often through circumstances that seem utterly incapable of supporting life or progress. What does it look like in your life right now? Are you facing a situation that feels like an insurmountable desert? Perhaps it's a financial struggle, a broken relationship, a health challenge, or a spiritual dryness that leaves you questioning everything. The temptation is to look at the outward circumstances and declare defeat, but God's word invites us to a different perspective. It asks us, "Do you not perceive it?" It's a gentle, yet insistent, nudge to look beyond the obvious, to search for the subtle signs of His active hand. This new thing God is doing isn't always a grand, sudden spectacle. Sometimes it's a quiet shift, a subtle redirection, a dawning realization. It's the way a dormant business suddenly finds new energy, or a long-estranged family member reaches out, or a persistent illness begins to recede. It's the subtle wellspring of hope that begins to bubble up within your heart, even when the external situation hasn't drastically changed. God is a master strategist, and His plans are often unfolding in phases, in ways that require our faith to bridge the gap between the promise and its full manifestation. So, as you sit with the reality of your wilderness, whatever it may be, I want to encourage you today. Don't let the dryness define your outlook. Trust that God is not only aware of your desert, but is actively at work within it. He is cultivating a new season, preparing a route where only emptiness resided. And this promise is not just for a select few, it is for every heart that dares to believe. It begs the question then, if God is making a way, are we willing to walk it when it appears, even if it seems unconventional? Have you ever experienced a sudden, beautiful bloom in a place that seemed utterly barren? Perhaps you've seen wildflowers carpet a mountainside after a long, dry spell, or watched a struggling sapling suddenly burst forth with vibrant new leaves. It looks like magic, doesn't it? But we know that for that bloom to appear, a whole lot of unseen work had to happen. Roots had to deepen, nourishment had to be absorbed, and a critical point of readiness had to be reached, all beneath the surface. This is the essence of what God is doing in those quiet, difficult seasons of our lives. Isaiah 43 verse 19 declares that God is not only making a way, but He's doing a new thing, and now it springs forth. This springing forth implies a process of development, a period of gestation. It's the moment when the hidden preparation becomes visible, and often we only see this breakthrough because the unseen work has already been meticulously completed by God behind the scenes of our perception. Consider a master chef preparing a feast. Before the guests even arrive, before the delectable aromas fill the air, hours of preparation have taken place. Vegetables are washed and chopped, sauces are simmered, dough is kneaded and proofed. The meticulous peeling, slicing, and dicing, these are the unseen acts that lead to the magnificent meal. If you only saw the finished plate, you'd miss the entire foundation of effort and intention that made it possible. God's work in our lives is often like that, a symphony of unseen preparations culminating in a glorious unfolding. Think about a time when you finally received an answer to prayer or a breakthrough materialized. How often did it feel like it came out of nowhere? But if you looked back, you might see threads of God's activity, moments of quiet conviction, nudges toward a certain action, unexpected encounters, or even periods of deep spiritual struggle that were actually forging your resilience and preparing you for what was to come. These were the unseen preparations, the silent chiseling of your character and circumstances by the divine hand. The wilderness experiences, the waiting periods, the times of apparent drought, these are not voids where nothing is happening. They are sacred spaces where God is at work, preparing the ground, deepening our foundations, and strengthening our capacity to receive what He has promised. It's where He's pruning away the unproductive branches so that the fruitful ones can bear more abundantly. It's where He's teaching us to rely on His provision instead of our own limited resources. This unseen labor is crucial. It's the invisible scaffolding that supports the visible miracle. Without these unseen preparations, any breakthrough we experience might be unstable or short-lived. God's work is always thorough, always foundational. He's not just giving us a temporary fix. He's cultivating a lasting transformation. And sometimes, the most profound growth we experience comes not from the visible mountaintop experiences, but from the quiet, often arduous, journey through the valleys and the deserts. It's in those moments of perceived lack that our faith is truly forged and refined. He is building something new, and it requires a solid, unseen foundation. So, as you reflect on your current season, however dry it may feel, remember Isaiah 43, verse 19. God is not just promising a way, He is actively preparing that way. And although you may not see the toil, the strategic placement, or the cultivation happening right now, trust that God's meticulous hand is at work, ensuring that when the fruit begins to appear, it will be robust, beautiful, and enduring. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what divine strategies are at play right now, unseen by our eyes, yet absolutely essential for what's next. What does it truly mean for God to do a new thing? Is it a complete departure from everything we've known, a radical rewriting of our story? Or is it something more subtle, a profound evolution of what already exists? When Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, speaks of God making a new way, it challenges us to consider the nature of divine innovation. It's not just about change, it's about creation, about bringing forth something that has never been before. Think of the very first sunrise, the initial spark of life. These were not improvements on existing phenomena. They were entirely novel occurrences. Sometimes, our perception of a new thing is colored by our expectations. We might envision a grand, dramatic event, but God's new things often emerge from the seemingly mundane, from the fertile ground of our present circumstances, even when those circumstances feel far from ideal. The new thing isn't necessarily about replacing the old, but about infusing it with a power and a purpose that transcends its original design. It's like taking a familiar melody and harmonizing it with rich, unexpected chords, creating a sound that is both recognizable and breathtakingly fresh. Imagine a potter with a lump of clay. The clay itself is not new, it's been around for ages. But when the potter begins to shape it, to fire it, to glaze it, it becomes something entirely new, a vessel, an art form, a functional object that simply didn't exist in that particular configuration before. God's new thing is often like that. He takes the raw materials of our lives, our experiences, our talents, our challenges, and through His divine artistry, He transforms them into something radically new, something that reflects His glory in a way we never anticipated. The promise in Isaiah 43, verse 19, is that this new thing springs forth. This implies a natural, almost organic emergence. It doesn't necessarily burst onto the scene with fireworks and fanfare. Instead, it begins to blossom, to assert its presence through growth and development. This is a crucial point. God's newness is often infused with life and dynamism. It's not static. It's alive and developing, pushing outward and upward, much like the new thing of creation itself. So, when you're in your wilderness and you're praying for God to do something new, consider this. He might not be bringing an entirely unfamiliar element into your life. He might be taking what is already there, what you already possess, and infusing it with a divine power that transforms its very nature. It could be a new perspective on an old problem, a renewed passion for a long-forgotten dream, or a deeper capacity for love and forgiveness that transforms your relationships from the inside out. The newness is in the divine infusion, the radical transformation of the existing. This new thing is also a demonstration of God's boundless creativity and his unending desire to bring forth life and beauty. It's a testament to his power to redeem, to renovate, and to reimagine. He is not limited by the past, nor is he constrained by our current limitations. When he declares a new thing, he is setting in motion a process that will bring forth something wonderful, something that will surprise us with its beauty and its impact. It's a radical act of divine love, designed to reveal his character and his power in fresh, invigorating ways. Therefore, as we consider Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, we're invited to embrace the possibility of divine innovation within the familiar. What if the new thing he is preparing is not something entirely external, but a radical internal shift, a reimagining of what's already within you? And if God is creating something new, what might that mean for how we are called to live and to participate in his unfolding plan? In the midst of our wilderness seasons, when the landscape is dominated by dryness and a sense of stagnation, it's incredibly tempting to define our reality solely by what we can see. Our eyes scan the horizon for visible signs of change, an unopened door, a financial deposit, a healed body. But the prophet Isaiah, in chapter 43, verse 19, poses a profound question. Do you not perceive it? This question isn't merely rhetorical. It's an invitation, a gentle challenge to awaken our spiritual senses, to learn to discern God's activity even when it's not overtly apparent. What does it mean to perceive in this context? It's more than just seeing with our physical eyes. It's a deeper spiritual discernment, an attunement to the subtle whispers of the Holy Spirit, a recognition of God's presence and his work that goes beyond empirical evidence. It's like a blind person who learns to see through heightened touch or hearing. They develop an alternative way of perceiving their reality. Our spiritual perception is about cultivating that inner awareness. Think of a time you felt an undeniable sense of peace in a chaotic situation, or a sudden spark of creativity that seemed to come from nowhere. These aren't always grand miracles, but they are often the subtle ways God communicates, the gentle nudges that indicate he is at work. The question, do you not perceive it, is God's way of saying, look closer, listen deeper, there is more happening than meets the eye. He is inviting us to move beyond a superficial assessment of our circumstances and to engage with a higher reality. This perception is cultivated through prayer, through dwelling in his word, and through actively seeking his presence. It's like training a muscle. The more we engage our spiritual senses, the stronger they become. We start to notice the coincidences that aren't coincidental, the synchronicities that point to a divine orchestrator. We begin to feel the stirring of hope when all logical reasons for hope have vanished. This is spiritual perception in action. It's recognizing the subtle, yet powerful, currents of God's grace flowing beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The adversary, on the other hand, wants us to be blind. He thrives on our fixation on the visible and the tangible because it keeps us trapped in despair and doubt. He amplifies the negatives, magnifies the impossibilities, and whispers that God is silent and absent. But God's promise in Isaiah 43, verse 19, is an antidote to this spiritual blindness. It's a call to open our eyes, to tilt our heads, and to listen with our hearts for the subtle unfolding of His new thing. How do we cultivate this perception in our own lives? It begins with a posture of humility and a willingness to believe that God is active, even when we don't see clear evidence. It means asking God to open our eyes, to grant us the grace to perceive His work. It involves intentionally looking for the signs of His presence, however small, a moment of unexpected joy, a word of encouragement from a stranger, a renewed sense of purpose. These are not random occurrences. They are often God's soft signals, His gentle illuminations. As we continue to explore the depths of Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, we are faced with this vital challenge. Are we truly open to perceiving the divine tapestry being woven in our lives, even when the threads are subtle and the pattern is not yet fully revealed? What might it mean for our faith journey to move from simply believing in God to actively perceiving His presence with us, even in the driest of lands? When we feel like we're in a barren land, devoid of progress and seemingly forgotten, it's easy to question God's affection or His capability to intervene. But the promise in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, is not just about God's power to create. It's deeply rooted in His active, loving will. He is not compelled by an external force to make a way. His action is born from the very essence of His being, love. This isn't a reluctant intervention. It is a proactive expression of His deep desire for our flourishing. Think about a parent lovingly tending to a wilting plant in their home. They don't just hope it gets better. They actively provide water, adequate sunlight, and nutrient-rich soil. Their actions are motivated by a desire to see the plant thrive, to restore its vibrancy. God's love for us is infinitely more profound and active. When Isaiah declares, "I am making a way in the wilderness," it's God speaking directly, personally, declaring His intent to intervene out of love for His people. This divine action is a testament to God's faithfulness. He saw the Israelites in their exile, in their spiritual and physical wilderness, and He promised them a future of restoration. This promise wasn't born out of their perfect obedience, but out of His unwavering covenant love. Similarly, when He makes a way, it's an act of love that transcends our worthiness. It's a declaration that He values us and desires our freedom and our advancement, regardless of our current state. Consider the parable of the lost sheep. Jesus Himself illustrates this active pursuit. The shepherd doesn't wait for the sheep to find its way back. He leaves the 99 and actively searches for the one that is lost. The effort, the risk, the singular focus, this is the action of loving intent. When God makes a way in the wilderness, He is demonstrating that same active, searching, rescuing love. He is reaching into our dry places to bring us to a place of abundance. The word making itself implies an ongoing process, not a static pronouncement. It's an active verb, suggesting that God's love is not passive or distant. It is involved, engaged, and working tirelessly on our behalf. Even when we feel our prayers are unanswered, even when the wilderness seems endless, this verse assures us that God's love is actively orchestrating a way forward. It's a love that sees our struggle and is moved to transform it. This active love is also the source of the new thing He is doing. It's because He loves us that He doesn't want us to remain perpetually in a state of lack or brokenness. His love is inherently creative, seeking to build, to restore, and to bring forth life. The rivers in the desert are not merely a practical solution. They are a symbol of the abundance and restoration that His love brings, transforming the desolate into the life-giving. So, as we ponder Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, let the assurance of God's active love wash over you. It is His love that compels Him to forge paths in impossible terrains and to bring forth new life where only emptiness existed. It's a powerful reminder that our God is not a distant observer, but an engaged, loving participant in the unfolding of our lives. What then does this boundless, active love ask of us in return, especially when we find ourselves in these seemingly impossible landscapes? Imagine a vast, arid wasteland. For years, it has lain fallow, baking under an unforgiving sun, cracked and barren, with no sign of water or fertile soil. Nothing grows here. The local people have long since given up any hope of cultivation, accepting it as a place of permanent desolation. They walk around it, never looking for life within its borders, only seeing the dust and the despair. One day, a peculiar gardener arrives. He doesn't look like any farmer they know. He carries no sacks of seed, no water barrels, at least not in the way they expect. Instead, he begins to simply walk the land. He runs his hands over the parched earth, not with despair, but with a strange kind of anticipation. He murmurs words they can't quite understand, words that seem to carry a hidden resonance, a promise of life against all odds. He doesn't bring immediate rain, nor does he carve out a riverbed with brute force. Instead, he begins to place small, smooth stones at various intervals across the barren expanse. Some people scoff. "What good are stones in a desert?" they whisper. "He's wasting his time. This land is dead." These stones, seemingly insignificant, are placed with deliberate care, their arrangement hinting at a hidden pattern, a future structure. The gardener continues his work, seemingly unfazed by the skepticism, his focus unwavering. He digs small depressions around some of the stones, not to plant seeds, but to gather whatever minuscule dew might fall in the night. Weeks turn into months. The wasteland remains outwardly the same, dry, unbroken dirt. Yet the people notice something subtle changing in the gardener. His faith seems unshakable, fueled by an inner knowing that they cannot grasp. He continues to tend to those stones, clearing away the dust, collecting the scant dew, speaking to the unyielding earth. The skeptic's whispers grow louder, but the gardener's quiet actions speak louder still. They represent the unseen preparation, the foundation being laid for something that defies the present reality. Then, one morning, after a rare, gentle overnight mist, a miraculous sight unfolds. Around the smallest, most strategically placed stones, tiny, vibrant green shoots begin to emerge. It's not a flood, not a gushing river, but a delicate, persistent life force asserting itself. The dew collected by the gardener's careful depressions has provided just enough moisture, just enough sustenance, for these tenacious new beginnings to take root. The stones, once seen as useless clutter, now stand as markers, boundaries, and supports for this nascent life. The people are astonished. They had looked for grand gestures, for immediate floods, for visible rivers. But the gardener had understood that true renewal in a wasteland doesn't always begin with a spectacle. It begins with faithful, unseen preparation, with trusting the promise of life even when all evidence points to death. The stones weren't just stones, they were anchors for hope, conduits for God's meticulous, life-giving touch. He didn't just make a way, he orchestrated the very conditions for life to spring forth, patiently laying the groundwork for the miraculous. This gardener's patient work, his trust in the unseen, reflects the heart of God, who is always at work in our toughest seasons. He's not waiting for us to fix the wasteland, but is actively transforming it, often in ways that require us to trust his seemingly unconventional methods. Because if God is orchestrating life in a wasteland, what else might he be capable of nurturing in our own seemingly impossible situations? Even as the first tender shoots of green begin to appear in the wasteland, defying the dryness and the whispers of impossibility, a new kind of battle often emerges. It's not the external struggle against the barren landscape, but the internal wrestling match with doubt. The gardener, having laid the stones and nurtured the first signs of life, now faces a different challenge, convincing not only the land, but the hearts of the onlookers that this fragile new beginning is indeed real and sustainable. Within the hearts of the people who once scoffed, a flicker of wonder now competes with a deep-seated skepticism. They've seen the impossibility for so long, the years of fruitless earth, that their minds struggle to accept this nascent miracle. The whispers change their tune, but they don't disappear. "It's just dew," some murmured. "It's a fluke, it won't last." Others point out the smallness of the shoots. "Look how tiny they are." This isn't a real river, not a true beginning. This is the insidious nature of doubt. It doesn't always deny the evidence outright, but it seeks to minimize it, to reframe it, to cast a shadow of uncertainty over God's work. It whispers that the change is insignificant, temporary, and ultimately inconsequential. For the gardener, it's like trying to encourage a delicate seedling while someone continuously points out how small it is and predicts its imminent demise. The very act of nurturing becomes harder when faced with such pervasive negativity. Imagine the gardener feeling that internal pressure. He knows the potential, he trusts the process that God has put in motion, but the constant barrage of doubt can be wearying. It's the internal voice that echoes the external skepticism. Are you sure this is enough? Is this really what God promised? Maybe they're right. Maybe this little bit of green will just wither and die. This is the spiritual tension, the battle between the glimpsed promise and the ingrained habit of expecting failure. This parable highlights that even when God begins to manifest his promises, our own internal resistance can hinder our full reception of them. Doubt acts like a harsh wind, threatening to uproot those tender shoots of hope before they have had a chance to firmly establish themselves. It breeds impatience, demanding the full river now, failing to appreciate the foundational work of the dew and the stones. It seeks immediate, undeniable proof, while God is perfecting a patient, resilient growth. And this doubt isn't just about the external circumstances, it's often about our own perceived inadequacy. Could I have done something differently? Was there a better way I should have prayed? Did I miss a crucial step? These questions, fueled by doubt, can paralyze us, making us hesitant to fully embrace the emerging breakthrough, fearing it will be snatched away or prove to be an illusion. The spiritual journey is often characterized by these moments where our faith is tested not by outward oppression, but by the loud, critical voice of our own inner doubt. So, as we witness the delicate green shoots pushing through the wasteland, we must also acknowledge the quiet, persistent presence of doubt. It's a common companion on the path of faith, and recognizing its voice is the first step in learning to silence it. Because if the gardener is facing this internal battle, what does that reveal about the nature of our own spiritual warfare, especially when God is actively working in our lives? The wasteland was vast, the sun relentless, and hope seemed a distant mirage. Yet around those strategically placed stones, a miracle began. It wasn't a sudden deluge that carved out a mighty river, but the persistent work of dew, meticulously gathered, providing the vital sustenance for the most delicate, tender shoots of green to emerge. This is the potent truth of Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19. God's new things often begin with the smallest of beginnings. Think of a single grain of sand. Individually, it's insignificant. But billions of them, over millennia, can form breathtaking beaches and towering dunes. Or consider the first beat of a human heart, a tiny, rhythmic pulse that signifies the commencement of an entire life, with all its complexities and potential. God's power doesn't always manifest in thunderous events. Often, it begins with a whisper, a subtle stirring, a seemingly insignificant deposit of grace. The new thing he is doing and the way he is making can start with something incredibly small. For the gardener in our parable, those tiny green shoots were everything. They were the tangible proof that his faithful preparation, his trust in the dew and the stones, was not in vain. They were the promise of the mighty river to come, blossoming from this infinitesimal start. He understood that to nurture this new life, he had to pour his attention, his care, and his faith into these smallest expressions of hope. It's a powerful lesson for us. Do not despise the day of small things. In our own lives, we often overlook these small beginnings. We are looking for the flood, the audible voice, the dramatic intervention. But God often works through quiet nudges, moments of clarity that feel fleeting, acts of kindness from unexpected sources, or a sudden resurgence of inner peace amidst turmoil. These are the dewdrops of his grace, the tiny shoots of his promise. If we dismiss them as too small, too insignificant, we risk missing the very inception of the new thing he is bringing forth. The skepticism in the parable arose precisely because the beginnings were small. The doubters couldn't see a river, so they saw nothing of consequence. They focused on the absence of the grand outcome rather than the presence of the foundational start. But the gardener, guided by a deeper understanding and a steadfast faith, recognized that the small beginning was the essential first step. It was the seed from which the river would eventually flow. This is where our faith is truly tested, in our ability to believe in and nurture the nascent promise. So, as you hold on to the promise of Isaiah 43, verse 19, remember that the breakthrough you are praying for might not arrive in a single, overwhelming wave. It might be a series of small, consistent victories, a gradual unfolding of God's provision and power. It requires us to be attentive, to be faithful in the small moments, and to trust that God is building something substantial from the seemingly insignificant. His ability to create rivers in the desert is demonstrated not just in the final outcome, but in his power to nurture life from the tiniest spark. Therefore, as we contemplate this profound truth, it begs the question: are we willing to embrace and nurture the small beginnings God is placing in our lives, even when they don't immediately resemble the grand river of our desires? And what if that smallness is exactly where his greatest power is revealed? The gardener stood amidst the emerging green shoots, a testament to his faith and God's promise. Yet the journey was far from over. The new thing was springing forth, the way was being made, but the river had not yet fully formed. This phase, this delicate period of growth before maturity, requires a profound strength, the strength that comes from waiting with intentionality and hope. It's a waiting that is not passive resignation, but an active, faith-filled posture. Consider the process of healing. A wound doesn't vanish overnight. It requires time, care, and the body's own resilient capacity to mend. Rushing the process, trying to force the skin to close prematurely, can lead to complications and a weaker scar. Similarly, God's work in our lives, especially when forging a new thing in a wilderness, often requires a season of deliberate waiting. This waiting is not a sign of God's delay, but of his wisdom in allowing processes to unfold in their optimal time. In our parable, the gardener continued to tend to the emerging life. He didn't declare victory the moment the shoots appeared. He understood that these fragile beginnings needed protection, nourishment, and time to develop resilience. This is the strength our faith needs in the waiting period, the strength to continue tending, to keep praying, to keep believing, even when the full manifestation of the promise is not yet visible. It's a quiet endurance that refuses to be swayed by the absence of immediate results. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, speaks of God making a way, a continuous action. This implies that the process of creation and transformation is ongoing. Our waiting becomes an active participation in this divine process. It's about trusting that God is not just preparing the way, but also preparing us for the way. This often involves deep inner work, cultivating patience, deepening our dependence on him, and learning to find contentment in his presence, even amidst unfulfilled desires. The strength in waiting is not an easy strength to find. It requires us to surrender our need for control, our desire for immediate gratification, and our tendency to measure progress solely by visible outcomes. It's a strength that spiritual giants have cultivated throughout history, those who weathered immense trials with unyielding hope. They understood that sometimes the most powerful act of faith is simply to stand firm, to trust the unseen hand at work, and to wait for the appointed time. This waiting period is a crucial crucible for faith. It refines our character, clarifies our desires, and deepens our relationship with God. It teaches us that our ultimate hope is not in the arrival of the breakthrough, but in the God who orchestrates it. The rivers in the desert are a beautiful picture of God's provision, but the strength to reach them is forged in the patient journey through the dry lands. And this strength is not passive, it's an active, hopeful anticipation. So, as we continue to watch the gardener nurture the infant life, we must ask ourselves, do we possess the strength to wait with hope, actively tending to the small beginnings God has placed in our lives, trusting that His process is perfect, even when it requires patience? Because if God is building a river from dew and stones, what is the most potent force He is cultivating within us during this patient waiting? The tender shoots in the wasteland were a beautiful sight, a testament to God's promise and the gardener's faithful care. But the true miracle, the rivers in the desert, had not yet fully materialized in their powerful flow. The gardener knew this. He understood that the dew and the stones were but the initial steps, the foundational elements that would eventually give rise to something far grander. The source of that eventual river, however, remained a mystery to the onlookers, and perhaps even a point of deep contemplation for the gardener himself. This speaks to a profound truth about divine provision. Often the most abundant blessings, the most life-transforming rivers, originate from sources that are hidden from our view. We see the water flowing, we experience its life-giving power, but the deep springs, the underground reservoirs, the intricate network of tributaries that feed it, these remain unseen. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, promises rivers, but it doesn't immediately reveal their origin. This encourages us to look beyond the immediate delivery system and trust that God's provision is deep, abundant, and divinely orchestrated. Imagine standing by a magnificent waterfall. You are mesmerized by the cascading water, the roar, the mist. But do you see the powerful currents upstream, the vast lakes that feed it, the geological formations that channel its flow? No, you see the dramatic output. In our spiritual lives, we often focus intently on the waterfall, the answer to prayer, the breakthrough, the tangible blessing. But the true source of that blessing, the deep wellspring of God's faithfulness and power, is often hidden from our immediate sight. The gardener's wisdom lay in his trust of this unseen source. He nurtured the dew because he believed it was a manifestation of a larger, more abundant water cycle. He placed the stones with the understanding that they would channel something greater. This mirrors our own spiritual journey. We are called to be faithful with the dew, the small blessings, the present opportunities, because we trust that they are connected to the inexhaustible river of God's provision. Our faith is anchored not just in the visible flow, but in the unseen, eternal source. This concept is powerful when we consider our own wilderness experiences. We might be praying for a breakthrough, for God to make a way, but we often get stuck focusing on how it should happen, on what the tangible results should look like. But what if God is working through an unseen source, a divine mechanism that we can't comprehend but can absolutely trust? What if the river is already flowing, originating from a place we cannot yet access, but that will eventually reach us? The promise of rivers in the desert is not just about a temporary relief. It's about a profound and lasting transformation that originates from an eternal, inexhaustible spring. It's a testament to God's unlimited capacity to bring life and abundance into the most desolate places. He is the source, and His provision is always sufficient, always abundant, and always originates from a place of deep, unwavering love. This deeper understanding of the source of God's provision invites us to a new level of trust. Therefore, as we continue to absorb the promises of Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, we are challenged to look beyond the immediate manifestation of God's blessing and to trust in the unseen, inexhaustible source from which all life and provision flow. Because if the river promises to flow abundantly from an unseen origin, what does it mean for us to learn to draw from that same eternal fountain, even before the waters reach our present desert? The gardener, with his steady gaze and patient spirit, was more than just a caretaker of the emerging green shoots. He was an embodiment of God's active promise. His hands, roughened by the soil, were instruments of divine faithfulness. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, speaks of God making a way, and in our parable, it is the gardener's diligent, consistent actions that translate that divine making into tangible reality. His faithfulness mirrored God's own, demonstrating that the unfolding of miracles often involves human partnership, guided by heavenly wisdom. Think about the immense trust placed in the gardener. The land offered no encouragement. The seeds of doubt were sown among the people, yet he persisted. His hands were constantly at work, collecting dew, clearing stones, tilling the ground around the fragile shoots. These were not grand gestures, but small, consistent acts of dedication. This is the kind of faithfulness that God often uses to bring his promises to fruition. He equips us, directs us, and then calls us to partner with him through our own faithful actions. This partnership is not about earning God's favor, it's about responding to his grace. The gardener didn't create the life-giving potential within the dew or the earth. He acted as God's conduit, his faithful hands facilitating the connection between divine power and the physical reality. In our own lives, when God is making a way, he often calls us to perform specific actions, to be the hands and feet of his provision. These actions might seem small, even insignificant, but they are vital for the manifestation of his larger plan. Consider the parable of the loaves and fishes. Jesus held up the meager offering of a few loaves and fish, but it was the disciples' willingness to take those offerings and distribute them that the miracle passed through. Their faithful hands were essential in multiplying the food. Similarly, when God is bringing forth rivers in our deserts, he often uses our willing hands to carry the water, to share the abundance, and to extend his life-giving provision to others. Our obedience, our willingness to act, becomes a vital part of the divine unfolding. The gardener's dedication also speaks to the importance of perseverance. Faithfulness is not a one-time act, it's a sustained commitment. He didn't stop tending after the first shoots appeared. He continued his work, knowing that the journey from a tiny sprout to a flowing river required ongoing effort and unwavering trust. This is the strength God often cultivates in us during transitional seasons. The ability to remain faithful, to keep showing up, to keep doing the work he has called us to, even when the full harvest is not yet visible. This faithful partnership is not always easy. It requires us to listen intently to God's direction, to discern his will, and to act with courage, even in the face of doubt or opposition. But the reward is immense. To be a co-creator with the Almighty, to see life flourish through our obedience, and to be a tangible expression of God's love and power in the world. The gardener's hands were not just preparing the land. They were actively participating in the miracle of creation. Therefore, as we see the gardener's tireless dedication, we are compelled to ask ourselves, how are our own hands being used by God to facilitate his promises in our lives and the lives of others? Because if God's faithful hands are at work in the world, what does it require of us to align our actions with his, especially when he is shaping deserts into flowing rivers? The initial miracle was the emergence of green shoots, a defiance of the wasteland's barren grip. But the ultimate promise, the breathtaking vision revealed in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, is that of rivers in the desert. This isn't just about a temporary oasis or a fleeting patch of life. It's about a fundamental transformation of the entire landscape. The wasteland itself is destined to be altered, to become a place where life not only survives, but thrives in abundance. In our parable, the gardener's work is not complete with the first sprouts. His continued nurturing, his patient tending, leads to a gradual but undeniable shift. The dew, once a scarce commodity, begins to coalesce. The stones, once inert markers, start to channel trickles of water. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, the dry earth begins to soften, to absorb, to show signs of sustained hydration. The landscape is undergoing a profound metamorphosis. What was once defined by scarcity is becoming a place of life-giving flow. This transformation is a powerful metaphor for the work God does in our lives and in the world. He doesn't just offer a temporary escape from our difficulties, he brings about a profound change from the inside out. The wilderness, our barren circumstances, our spiritual dryness, our emotional desolation is not meant to be our permanent address. God's intention is to redeem it, to renew it, and to bring forth a flourishing abundance where only emptiness once reigned. He is not just adding water, he is redefining the very nature of the land. Think of the Red Sea parting for the Israelites. It wasn't just a temporary crossing, it was a dramatic transformation of a physical barrier, revealing a path where no path had existed. Or consider Jesus healing the blind man. The transformation was not just about sight returning, but about a whole new way of experiencing the world. God's transformations are often comprehensive, affecting the very essence of the situation, turning desolation into life. The landscape of our lives is subject to His redemptive power. This metamorphosis is a testament to God's power to bring forth life from apparent death. The desert, characterized by its lack of water and vegetation, is miraculously reformed into a place where rivers can flow. This implies a fundamental restructuring, a reimagining of what is possible. The very elements that defined its barrenness are harnessed and redirected for the purpose of life and abundance. It's a divine artistry that seeks to bring forth beauty and sustenance from the most unlikely of places. When we pray for God to make a way, we are praying for this kind of transformation. We are not just asking for a detour around our problems, but for a fundamental reshaping of our circumstances so that life and His presence can flow freely. This profound change is a signature of God's work, turning the desolate into the dynamic, the barren into the bountiful. It's His ultimate desire for us and for His creation. So, as the gardener witnesses the landscape itself beginning to shift under the influence of the nascent rivers, we too are invited to anticipate this radical transformation in our own lives. What does it mean to embrace the possibility that God is not just providing a temporary solution, but orchestrating a complete and beautiful overhaul of our deepest needs and circumstances, turning our deserts into something perpetually life-giving? The gardener's diligent work had not gone unnoticed. The small green shoots were thriving, and the first signs of flowing water were appearing, gently carving their path through the once barren earth. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, speaks not just of the presence of rivers, but implicitly of their journey. Water in a desert is life-giving by its very nature, and its movement is essential for that life to spread and sustain itself. This journey of the water is a powerful metaphor for the progression of God's promises in our lives. Imagine the water beginning its flow. It starts as a trickle, perhaps gathering around the stones the gardener meticulously placed. This trickle is like the first stirrings of hope, the initial whisper of breakthrough. It's not yet a mighty torrent, but it's moving, it's alive, and it's carrying the potential for immense change. The journey of this water represents the ongoing process of God's provision and restoration, a process that unfolds over time, gaining momentum and power as it moves. The journey of the water also highlights the interconnectedness of God's work. One drop of dew, seemingly insignificant, joins with another, and then another, forming a trickle. This trickle flows into a stream and eventually into a river. Each stage is vital, each movement contributes to the larger flow. In our lives, this means that the small acts of faithfulness, the consistent prayers, the steady obedience, are all part of a grander journey towards the fulfillment of God's promises. They are the building blocks of the flowing river of His blessing. Furthermore, the journey of water through a desert is a transformative one, not just for the land, but for the water itself. As it flows, it gathers minerals, it carves new paths, it nourishes everything in its wake. Similarly, as God's promises move through our lives, they transform us. We are shaped by the journey, our characters refined, our faith deepened, and our capacity for life and love expanded. The river of God's blessing isn't just coming to us, it's flowing through us, carrying His life to others. This ongoing journey also means that we are not meant to remain static. Just as water is always in motion, flowing from its source and towards its destination, so too are we called to move with the current of God's Spirit. When God makes a way, it is often an invitation to step forward, to follow the path that is being revealed, and to embrace the unfolding journey of His promise. The rivers in the desert are not meant to be stagnant pools, but flowing currents of His life and purpose. The gardener's continued tending is crucial during this phase. He ensures the channels are clear, that the water isn't blocked or diverted by obstacles. This mirrors our need for spiritual guidance and discernment as we navigate the unfolding of God's promises. We need to be attentive to the way God is leading, ensuring we are flowing with His current, not against it. The journey of the water is divine, but we are called to be active participants in its flow. Therefore, as we observe the water beginning its vital journey through the transformed landscape, we are inspired to consider the movement of God's promises in our own lives. What does it mean to embrace the ongoing journey of God's provision, to allow His transforming waters to flow not only to us, but through us? And what does this continuous flow reveal about the very heart of God's enduring faithfulness? The gardener's diligence in nurturing the emerging green shoots and guiding the initial flow of water was an act of profound hope. But the truth of Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, goes beyond the mere appearance of life. It speaks of sustaining life, of creating abundance even in the most challenging environments. Rivers in the desert implies a continuous, life-giving flow, not a fleeting moment of refreshment. This sustained provision is a powerful testament to God's enduring faithfulness. Imagine the desert dwellers who had become accustomed to scarcity. They had learned to conserve every drop of water, to hoard every bite of food. Now, faced with the prospect of flowing rivers, they might struggle to grasp the concept of abundance. How can a desert, a place inherently defined by lack, possibly sustain a continuous flow of life-giving water? This is where the divine intervention challenges our limited human understanding. God's provision is not merely adequate, it is abundant, designed to overcome the limitations of the environment. The gardener's task was not just to initiate the water's flow, but to ensure its continuity. This meant reinforcing the channels, ensuring the collected dew consistently replenished the growing streams, and creating an ecosystem where life could truly take root and flourish. This sustained life-giving power is God's signature. He doesn't offer temporary fixes for eternal needs. His new thing is designed to transform the very nature of the arid landscape, making it a place of continuous sustenance. Think of the manna that sustained the Israelites in the wilderness. It was provided daily, demonstrating a consistent, God-ordained provision that met their needs day after day. It wasn't a one-time miracle, but an ongoing testament to God's faithfulness. Similarly, the rivers in the desert are a picture of God's unwavering commitment to sustaining His people, providing for their deepest needs, and enabling them to thrive even when outward circumstances seem incapable of supporting life. This sustained life is also about resilience. A lone drop of dew might be quickly evaporated by the sun, but a flowing river can sustain a vast ecosystem. God's provision is not fragile. It is robust and powerful, capable of enduring and transforming even the most hostile environments. When He makes a way, it's a way that is built to last, a source of life that continues to flow, offering hope and sustenance through all seasons. This resilience is a key characteristic of divine abundance. The gardener's continued dedication to tending the nascent rivers underscores the active role God plays in sustaining the life He creates. He doesn't just start the process and walk away. He remains involved, ensuring that the provision is consistent, that life is nurtured, and that the desert is transformed into a place of enduring abundance. This active sustaining power is a profound comfort to us, especially in our own dry seasons. Therefore, as we witness the gardener's commitment to sustaining life emerging in the desert, we are called to trust in the enduring nature of God's provision. What does it mean to live with the assurance that God's rivers in the desert are not fleeting moments, but a continuous, life-giving source designed to sustain us through every season. And how does this certainty reshape our expectations of His ongoing faithfulness? As the rivers began to flow with greater strength, transforming the landscape and sustaining the vibrant life, a new and beautiful sound began to echo through the formerly silent wasteland, the echo of gratitude. The people who had once scoffed and doubted were now witnessing the undeniable reality of God's transformative power. Their skepticism yielded to awe, and their whispers of despair gave way to heartfelt praise. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, promises a miraculous provision, and this provision naturally inspires a response of thankfulness. The gardener, having brought forth such abundant life, would surely feel a deep sense of satisfaction, but perhaps more profoundly, a profound sense of awe. He witnessed the culmination of his faithful efforts, not as his own accomplishment, but as a testament to the power he served. This awe naturally leads to a heart of gratitude. When we see God move in impossible ways, when He turns our deserts into flowing rivers, the only appropriate response is a heart overflowing with thankfulness. This gratitude is not merely a polite acknowledgement. It is a powerful spiritual force. It shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have been given. It acts as a spiritual amplifier, opening our hearts to receive even more of God's blessings. When we express gratitude for the dew and the shoots, we are acknowledging the foundational work that paves the way for the river. It's a recognition of God's faithfulness at every stage. In our parable, imagine the joyous sounds that would rise from the revitalized land. Children playing by the water's edge, elders marveling at the new growth, farmers tending to the fertile soil. These sounds of life and celebration are infused with an underlying melody of gratitude. This is the desired outcome of God's transformative work, not just provision, but a people who are so overwhelmed by His goodness that they cannot help but give thanks. Gratitude also serves as a witness. The transformed wasteland, now teeming with life and flowing water, becomes a testament to God's power, and the joyful sounds of the people become a testimony to His faithfulness. When we share our stories of breakthrough, when we openly express our thanks for God's intervention, we invite others to believe in the same power that transformed our own deserts. It's a way of spreading the life-giving water of His goodness. The practice of gratitude can also be a powerful antidote to complacency. When life is abundant, it's easy to forget the times of scarcity, to take the blessings for granted. But by consciously cultivating gratitude, we keep the memory of God's faithfulness alive, ensuring that we continue to honor Him and recognize His hand in our lives, even when the rivers are flowing abundantly. It keeps our hearts humble and our spirits attuned to His presence. Therefore, as the joyful echoes of gratitude begin to resonate through the transformed landscape, we are invited to consider the responsive heart of faith. What does it mean to cultivate a spirit of gratitude, not just for the grand rivers, but for every drop of dew and every tender shot that God places in our path? And how does this attitude of thankfulness prepare us for even greater expressions of His abundant grace? As the rivers flowed and the wasteland bloomed, the gardener's work was undeniably successful. Yet, with every great blessing, there often come unintended consequences, shifts in the landscape of life that were not immediately foreseeable. This is not to suggest that God's blessings are problematic, but rather that their transformative power creates new dynamics, new opportunities, and sometimes new challenges. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, promises a profound shift, and the reality of that shift brings with it a new context for living. The emergence of flowing water in the desert would undoubtedly attract attention. Perhaps other communities, accustomed to their own arid existence, would be drawn to this newfound abundance. This could lead to new relationships, new opportunities for trade and fellowship, but also potentially to conflicts over resources or differing ways of life. The blessing of the river, while life-giving, creates a new social and environmental reality that requires adaptation and wisdom. The unintended consequence is growth, expansion, and the need for responsible stewardship. In our parable, the gardener might find that his work is no longer just about nurturing the land, but also about managing the interactions that the flourishing environment creates. He might need to establish boundaries, mediate disputes, or teach new practices for sharing the water responsibly. These were not the primary goals when he began placing stones in the barren earth, but they are the natural outcomes of a successful transformation. The blessing brings with it a new set of responsibilities. This reminds us that God's new things and ways are not always simple continuations of our old lives with added benefits. They often involve a radical reshaping that brings about new circumstances we must navigate. The blessing of a breakthrough might mean new opportunities, but also new pressures. The healing of a relationship might lead to deeper intimacy, but also to confronting the past hurts more directly. These are the unintended, yet often vital, consequences of divine intervention. The challenge for us is to embrace these new realities with wisdom and grace. Just as the gardener had to adapt his approach as the desert transformed, we too must be willing to learn, to grow, and to adjust as God's blessings unfold in our lives. This might mean developing new skills, seeking wise counsel, or reevaluating our priorities. The abundance that God provides is always meant to enrich, but it requires us to mature in our use and stewardship of His gifts. The unintended consequences of blessing are not deterrents, but rather indicators of the profound impact of God's work. They signal that life is expanding, that possibilities are multiplying, and that a new chapter is unfolding. The key is to approach these new dynamics with a prayerful heart, seeking God's guidance on how to best steward the abundant life He has made possible. It's about embracing the full scope of His transformative work. Therefore, as we observe the ripples spreading from the flowing rivers in the desert, we are prompted to consider how God's blessings, while overwhelmingly good, can also present us with new dynamics and responsibilities. What does it mean to be prepared for the unfolding and sometimes unexpected consequences of God's abundant grace? And how can we navigate these new realities with the same wisdom the gardener brought to his task? The gardener's work had transformed a wasteland into a place of vibrant life, with flowing rivers and sustained abundance. The legacy of his efforts, and more importantly, the legacy of God's promise in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, was not just the immediate provision, but the creation of a lasting ecosystem of life. This is the ultimate aim of God's intervention, to bring about a renewal that endures, that flourishes, and that continues to nourish for generations to come. Imagine the generations that would grow up by these rivers, never knowing the true desolation of the land before. They would take the abundance for granted, perhaps, but they would also inherit a legacy of life, a testament to the power that once transformed the barren to the bountiful. This enduring impact is the hallmark of God's work. He doesn't just provide temporarily, He establishes foundations for a continuing flow of His goodness and life. In our parable, the legacy of the gardener's work would be evident in the thriving community, the fertile fields, and the sustained well-being of all who lived there. His labor, guided by divine wisdom, had created not just a temporary fix, but a sustainable reality. This is the profound hope we find in God's promises, that His interventions are not fleeting but foundational, designed to establish a lasting inheritance of life and blessing. This lasting legacy also speaks to the way God's promises often extend beyond our own lifetime. The new thing He does and the way He makes can have ripple effects that impact future generations. Just as the Israelites carried the memory and the legacy of God's miraculous provision through the wilderness, so too can our experiences of God's faithfulness become a legacy for those who follow us. The rivers in the desert are a symbol of an enduring renewal. The gardener's faithfulness in tending to the continuous flow of the rivers ensured their longevity. It wasn't enough to simply create them, they had to be sustained. This mirrors our own responsibility to steward the blessings God gives us, to pass on the lessons learned, and to ensure that the life-giving principles we've experienced continue to flow. The legacy of God's work is deepened when we are faithful stewards of His grace, and this enduring life is a profound expression of God's covenant faithfulness. He promises to bring forth life and to sustain it, not out of caprice, but out of a deep, abiding commitment to His creation. The transformation of the desert is a testament to His unwavering love, a love that seeks to establish a heritage of life that will echo through time. The rivers are not just a present reality, they are a promise of continued abundance. Therefore, as we marvel at the enduring life that now thrives in the former wasteland, we are called to reflect on the profound and lasting impact of God's work. What does it mean to embrace His enduring promises, to become stewards of the legacy of life He establishes, and how can we ensure that the rivers of His grace continue to flow, leaving an indelible mark for generations to come? The gardener stood amidst the flourishing landscape, the rivers flowing, life abundant, a testament to God's promise fulfilled. Yet, as one season of transformation draws to a close, the spiritual journey always beckons us towards the next. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, has illuminated God's powerful work in the dry places, showing us His ability to create ways and bring forth life where none existed. But the story of faith is a continuous one, and even in abundance, the call to trust and to follow God's lead remains paramount. As the waters settled into their course, nurturing the land and its inhabitants, the gardener might have felt a sense of completion. The desperate need of the wasteland had been met, the impossible had been made possible. However, the nature of God's redemptive work is not about arriving at a final destination, but about constant movement in His presence. Even in a place transformed from desert to paradise, there are always new horizons to explore, new ways to grow, and new challenges to face, all under His guiding hand. This is where the narrative gently guides us onward. Having experienced the miracle of rivers in the desert, having witnessed God's power to create anew, our faith is strengthened but not finished. There will be other landscapes that test our belief, other wildernesses that call for God's intervention. The lessons learned in this transformed desert, the trust in unseen preparations, the faith in small beginnings, the endurance in waiting, are not obsolete. They are the very tools we will need for the next stage of our journey. Imagine the gardener, having brought life to this land, looking out at a new horizon, perhaps seeing the faint outline of another dry and challenging landscape in the distance. The call is not to rest in past victories, but to be ready for what God has next. The same God who made a way in the desert is the one who will call us forward, perhaps into a different kind of trial, a different kind of wilderness, where His power will again be needed and His presence will again sustain us. The fulfillment of one promise does not negate the call to trust for another. In fact, it often emboldens us, giving us a deeper reservoir of faith to draw upon. The experience of seeing rivers flow where there was only sand has prepared us to believe that God can and will continue to make ways for us, no matter the terrain. The echo of gratitude for what has been done is a powerful prelude to the anticipation of what God will do. So, as we stand in the fullness of the transformed landscape, a place once defined by lack but now brimming with life, we must acknowledge that this is not an ending, but a powerful transition. The foundations have been laid, the principles of faith have been learned, and the memory of God's mighty work is etched into our hearts. But the journey of faith is an ongoing one, and with every answered prayer, we are poised for the next step, the next calling, the next wilderness that God will lead us through. Therefore, as we reflect on the profound transformation from wasteland to oasis, we are left with a forward-looking perspective. Having experienced God's power to create life where there was none, what does it mean to now look towards the horizon, knowing that other challenges await? And how will the lessons learned in this desert prepare us for the next frontier, the next wilderness, where God will again prove Himself faithful? We journeyed through the barren lands, witnessed the patient toil of the gardener, and marveled as rivers began to flow where only sand had been. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, has painted a vivid picture of God's power to create newness, to make a way in the wilderness, and to bring forth life in the most desolate of circumstances. As our exploration of this profound promise draws to a close, we are left not with a final destination, but with a continuous assurance, the promise of the unfolding way. The transformed landscape is a powerful testament to God's faithfulness, a symbol of what He can do in our own lives. But life is a journey, and the wilderness or desert can represent many things: a season of difficulty, a period of spiritual dryness, a challenging circumstance that seems insurmountable. Each of these experiences calls for us to trust in the same God who turned sand into streams. He has not finished His work in us, nor in the world. The promise of the unfolding way means He is continually leading, guiding, and creating pathways for us. The gardener's work was foundational, but the river's flow continues, sustaining life and opening up new possibilities. Similarly, the breakthroughs God grants us are often stepping stones, not final stops. The new thing He begins often leads to further, deeper transformations. His ways are not always linear. They can be winding, surprising, and exhilarating, always leading us into a richer experience of His presence and His purpose. The promise is that He is continuing to make a way. This ongoing unfolding is a source of immense hope. It means that no matter what wilderness you may be facing right now, God is actively engaged in bringing forth life, in creating a path forward. It means that the current barrenness is not the end of your story, but a prelude to His creative intervention. The promise of the unfolding way assures us that He is with us in the journey, orchestrating every step. As we step out from the life-giving abundance of this transformed desert, we carry with us the profound truth that God's power is not limited by our present circumstances. He is the God of creation, the God of renewal, the one who can bring forth rivers in the driest of lands. And He is continuing to do so, not just in grand, miraculous displays, but in the quiet, persistent nurturing of life within our own hearts and lives. The way is always unfolding. So, let the echo of the flowing rivers remind you of yesterday's miracle, and let the promise of the unfolding way inspire your hope for tomorrow. Trust that God is making a way even now in the unseen places, in the quiet moments, and in the unfolding landscape of your life. His provision is continuous, His guidance is always present, and His transforming power is ever at work. Therefore, as we close this chapter, let the profound assurance of Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19, resonate deeply within you.